Hello, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of An Ordinary King. I'm so stoked to have you here, and I'm most excited that you are listening. Huzzah. So today's episode is a pretty cool one. I have with me Mott. Who is Mott, you say, apart from a witty remark? Mott is a non-binary sculptor, performance artist, and curator who identifies as neither man nor woman, but as lightning. Yes, lightning. That definitely pricked my ears. So a few months ago, I think probably towards the start of the year, I accidentally came across Mott's profile. I'm not quite sure, LinkedIn or online somewhere. I really cannot remember where it, but read Mott's bio and was just, I have to talk to this person. I just absolutely have to talk to this person. It's just mainly because one, they're interesting, and two, they identify as non-binary. So for me, this is completely foreign, completely outside of my community, outside of my world. So I had to talk to them, find out some more, and also find out about this person's life, about Mott's life. And so I checked out all their performances. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of links and descriptions and a shit ton of reading and visual stuff that you can check out. Please go ahead and check it out. It'll help as well with a little bit of context, but if you can't be asked checking it out, you just want to get straight into the podcast, again, hang in there. It's a good one. It's interesting. It's insightful. We talk about a lot to do with Mott's life, and I don't know, I just had a lot of fun. So first of all, thank you so much, Mott, for joining me on the show. I had a shit ton of fun talking to you, and I would love to catch up in the future and just talk about more stuff as well. So anyway, without further ado, that's a little personal remark, here they are, Mott.
But yeah, what I'd like to sort of discuss is, I guess, the process of my artwork and, how I identify and the community that I work with.
Yep.
In Melbourne, and how science and Indigenous knowledge inspires my work. And then I'm not sure if you, where my work started was a quote from the former lead singer of AC/DC, Bon Scott, was asked if he was the AC or the DC, and he replied that he was neither. He was the lightning flash in the middle. So that quote and that sort of reference that I go back to and researching him and seeing how he was incorrectly portrayed by the band and the media. He's actually a really intelligent feminist. So how people, can be pigeonholed and misunderstood, and how that sort of, he was a trickster. So how the trickster relates to my work as well.
Through different, I read that as well in your notes, how you were relating the trickster sort of archetype to different cultures, not just here in Australia, but as well as in the northern hemisphere as well, was one of the notes that you made.
Well, the trickster archetype, that's more Jungian.
Yeah.
And I am inspired by that. He's got a beautiful definition of the trickster, but the trickster that I'm looking at is a real life person that exists in Lakota communities in the US.
And in the North America.
So in Minnesota and Dakota.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's start there. Then let's sort of backtrack a little bit to the kind of the beginnings and sort of what was it that sort of kicked off your artistic career or your artistic mindscape and where all this sort of came from? Because was it just that statement from Bon Scott, that interview from Bon Scott, that stuck with you, or was there other things that do you think accumulated over the years and you were like, well, this is definitely the path forward?
Yeah, well, as a teenager, I started in dance.
Sure.
And I didn't know I was neurodiverse then. And so dance was a real celebration because it was a language that I actually could understand. And for various reasons, I couldn't continue with dance. And so I got into painting and sculpture.
Wow.
And I ended up doing an undergrad in sculpture, and I was represented by a commercial gallery while I was very young and, straight out of uni. And my work was about parasites because, I enjoyed the way they look like nothing else and how they, but yet they make you feel so sort of squeamish.
They do, yeah.
And then, as I progressed in my career, becoming represented very young, and I really wanted to search for something much more philosophical, and I knew that was going to be a massive journey. And part of that journey was moving to the US and learning about architecture, and realizing I wanted to learn about architecture, and then moving to Sydney and sharing a studio with an Aboriginal film director, which is where my education for, this quest to learn this philosophy that would be inherent in my work started. And I didn't want to be in Sydney, and so I didn't even want to be in Australia, and I for various reasons I had to be. And I found that listening to very early AC/DC made me laugh a lot.
Sure.
And I started doing small performances for, at private parties in Sydney. And it really just felt, it felt like it was a way I was making sculpture in space. I was really working with the objects in the room to do the performance.
Sure. And
then I got heavily involved in this architectural project, which was inspired by learning about Indigenous philosophies, a prefab building that sits lightly on the land, and you don't have to excavate the land. You don't need a big truck to transport it, and that was to do with learning about the sophistication of Aboriginal inventions that we are still only just learning about, and they're hard to find out about because all these inventions, a lot of them were biodegradable.
What kind of inventions do you mean?
Well, so one of the indicators of what makes a culture sophisticated, a primitive, so-called primitive culture sophisticated,
yeah,
is whether they invented protective footwear and the wheel. And Aboriginal Australian culture, that never really came out as being anything that they looked at. And so, but then I started learning about the physics of a boomerang, being a lot more sophisticated than the wheel.
The wheel doesn't come back.
Sorry?
The wheel doesn't come back.
Yeah, it's also having something, in flight, in the air. That's, aerodynamics is, highly sophisticated. And then learning that they did use protective footwear, or they do use protective footwear. They make them out of spinifex, and then When, they've crossed this rocky terrain, they they just biodegrade back into the land. So that's just a really basic introduction. But then there's so much coming out. There's a book called Dark Emu where Bruce Pascoe talks about all the Indigenous farming techniques.
Oh, I've actually heard of that book recently, to be honest with you. I haven't done much more research on it, but I have actually heard of this book recently.
Yeah, so they, and unfortunately, many of these inventions were documented by the early settlers or the early invaders, whichever way you want to look at it, where they actually drew pictures and described the inventions. And because they didn't understand them, a lot of the documentation was destroyed because they were a little concerned how they didn't understand these inventions. And then some of them, they just thought, oh, they're just really lazy, like fish traps where they just, fish just swims in and, I feel uncomfortable talking about this because I'm not Indigenous in terms of recording. This is all information that I've read from Indigenous authors or people researching Indigenous astronomy or farming.
Yeah.
So I'm really just speaking about it from my own
perspective,
my own method of learning.
Yeah, sure.
So, and that really, I guess the philosophy embedded in that is a way back to go forward. So, we think we're going forward with the way society's moving, but, with our current with our current pandemic, a lot of people are starting to question, well, actually, have we been moving forward? And do we actually need to go back and learn from Indigenous philosophies to move forward from here?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I do agree that the pandemic has definitely allowed people that moment and that silence and that stillness to sort of reflect, I guess, is where they think they're going and what sort of the basic value principles that we need to live life are. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from a lot of different cultures around the world, not just the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, but there's people all over the world that for centuries prior to where we are now, had lived quite coherently and quite in a great way with the environment and with each other as well. So I agree. There's always things that we can learn from the past, and sometimes I think people forget that.
I guess, I absolutely understand what you're saying, and this goes to my community, my identification as non-binary, my identification of lightning, as a way of departing from human, questioning human rights.
Yeah.
And part of this, I guess, is a form of activism. And although I agree with you, I live in Australia. We are living on stolen land. So if I'm going to learn from any culture, I need to really learn about the land that I'm living on. But also, I was born in the United States, so that's why I'm also researching Indigenous. Turtle Island is actually the name of North America, the Indigenous name. So
I didn't know that.
I call it Turtle Island. Yeah.
I didn't know that. Thank you so much for.
Yeah. There's so much that I'm. Once you start delving in, it's just so illuminating. My partner is an astronomer.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And his focus is, or his research is Aboriginal astronomy, and he's been learning so much from the sophistication of their knowledge.
Yeah.
I guess also, dissecting where we possibly went wrong. Even looking at the word human. When did we start using the word human? It's been very recent. And who had human rights? The French, declared human rights, but at the same time, women were being beheaded for speaking up. People of color didn't have human rights. So it seems that human rights really only apply to white men. So that's why I depart from the human and identify as lightning.
Sure. Yep. Sure. Okay. That was definitely going to be one of my questions. Was the identification as part of it? It's just, it makes a lot of sense now that when you talk about it. And I'm quite grateful that you have taken the time out of your day and of your life really to sit down with me and because I guess it's a good point for me to clarify my intentions for people out there listening as well as for yourself, Bon, is that I don't know a lot about the binary side of life and the non-binary, or the meanings and the pronouns, and while there's things that you can do to research, I kind of wanted to connect with you through your artwork, and you just felt like a quite an open person that was open, willing to discussion, and willing to talk and educate myself, because I'm just curious into the life of it, and sort of
well, it's really exciting, and because I am neurodiverse, I really struggle with part of my neurodiversity is I really struggle with reading and writing, and so podcasts are my favorite way of communicating.
aside from sculptures and art and dancing.
Well, yeah, exactly. But if I have to, as opposed to writing, I'd rather speak about my work than write about it.
Perfect.
So I'm always excited to do podcasts.
Okay. So let's talk about
I guess if you look at basically, it's a difficult. Sometimes it can be a difficult area to talk about without offending anyone, and that's exactly what I don't want to do. I don't want to offend anyone. So one way of doing that is going to science rather than opinion.
Sure.
And there are a lot of animals that change gender, and they're the mushroom. We don't even know if it's it sort of somehow is in between animal and plant, and it has a few thousand genders. We originated from bacteria, and bacteria has thousands of genders. In terms of from a, I'm not a geneticist. I don't want to go into talking about X and Y chromosomes, but it's not. It isn't that straightforward. There are people that look male, what we perceive as male, and they have more X chromosomes, and that's just there's many examples, and intersex is actually a real thing.
Sure.
But I think really when you look at how society has developed in terms of going from identifying with nature, say if you look at a culture that we did learn a lot about at school, say ancient Egypt, their god was the sun, and so there's this connection to nature. From what I can see with Christianity and I guess Western religions, or religions that aren't identifying with nature, it seemed as if there became a set of rules. And Adam and Eve is a perfect example. There's one or the other. But then it's just so bizarre. I didn't want this to turn into a religious conversation. It is so bizarre that Eve came from Adam's rib. What are we talking about here? Is this science?
I think we can both agree that there's some religious text out there that's pretty outdated in terms of philosophies and what people know now versus what they knew. Some people still follow it, and all for them. I think that's great. If that's what they need in their life, I think that's fantastic. But I me personally, I'm a science-based kind of the whole rib.
What sort of science are you interested in? What sort of?
I'm interested in just learning. I love the stars. I love the ocean and a lot to do with nature. I like a little bit of biology, but I don't really get too into it because it's just a little bit too over my head, to be honest with you. So I try to focus on sort of what's above the atmosphere, and I try to focus on the oceans.
Oh, well, let's focus on that then.
Okay.
Let's focus on both of those.
Sure.
So perhaps I can tell you about the process of lightning.
I love that. Perfect. Sounds great.
So originally, like in the 50s, we thought that lightning originated from a storm cloud. Is that what, positive and negative ions build up. There's it connects to the magnetic charge of the Earth. Mm-hmm. And there's a collapse of ions and, creating the lightning we see. Do you know anything, what's your understanding of lightning?
Well, that it actually goes the opposite way. It goes from the ground to the sky.
That's it. Yeah. And what's your understanding of where it comes from?
Well, I think my understanding is super limited, but it's just pretty much it's the closest charge that it can find. But then again, it's probably the closest highest charge that it can find. Like the highest number of ions that it can find, or in the ground, and then it just sort of finds an earth and boom. Pretty much. But I do know that lightning is also one of the biggest contributors to nitrogen levels in the soil. It's incredibly.
That's good that you know that. Nitrogen is the only thing that can split apart nitrogen so that it can form with oxygen.
Sure.
It actually, can split apart those tightly packed, the nitrogen. But this is all deeply embedded in my artwork as well, because I actually use the metaphor of this tightly packed nitrogen with Bon Scott's genes and his tightly packed genes, and I make artwork about that. But just science started questioning how 300 million volts of power could originate in a cloud. This research is pretty recent, like in the last 20, 25 years, and still, people are still ongoing, astrophysicists are still learning about it. Yep. And it crosses over from astrophysics to, atmospheric, science and chemistry, and geology. It crosses over all these areas, lightning. But so what happens is when a supernova occurs, which is a dying star, and I'm particularly interested in neutron stars. They're they're fascinating. I don't know if you've ever looked into them. But when a star dies, it explodes and releases highly charged particles, and those highly charged particles they just explode into space and travel almost at the speed of light, and they have they're muons, they're photons, they're highly charged particles, and some of those particles are able to get through the ozone layer. And when they do, there does have to be a storm cloud, and that means that the cloud is full of tubular ice, which
Sure.
has to be a particular size. It's like 6 centimeters, and the cloud has got positive and negative ions. So what happens is the cosmic ray. I mean, I know you're going to think I'm a lunatic talking about this because we weren't taught this at school.
It's okay. We can digress. This is great.
The cosmic ray connects with the tubular ice and short circuits. So this cosmic ray has come from, who knows where, another galaxy. We certainly don't have supernovas occurring, within our eyesight. Well, not recently anyway. When we see lightning, we're seeing something traveling from another galaxy.
Oh wow. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Okay.
So I guess when we look at our DNA, all the chemicals in our DNA, it's the same chemicals that were around when, they think that life was created through all the chemicals that were around on Earth, and incidentally, all of those came from supernova also. So gold, silver, magnesium, everything comes from supernova.
Yeah.
And delivered to Earth. But it was the actual volcanic lightning, the heat from the volcanic lightning that connected with these chemicals that created the first single
organisms.
The first bacteria that turned
into life.
Ended up developing from there. And,
so it wasn't an apple tree, and it wasn't. There's no judgment. I have no judgment. I swear to God, I'm just a little bit cheeky sometimes. But how do I connect this, and how do I segue this into how this? I'm guessing you do a lot of your artwork and a lot of the installations and a lot of the creative stuff that you bring to the world. You like to relate back to this, or do you like to send this message of creativity and life together in the one package, or what's sort of your process there?
Well, I mean, essentially we are energy. That's what I'm looking at. And
yes.
and there's a performance artist called Amaru Agadi, and they talk about how the quantum world is full of contradictions and non-binary states of being. So I guess that's what I focused around with my artwork. As artists, we're taught to, make work that, can be sold by a collector. It's printed on archival paper, or it's framed in a certain way, or it's an object, it's an archival object, and then that has value. But when you start questioning where these concepts come from, like what even the word archive means and where it came from, it's a very elitist word, and some cultures are more intangible. They don't believe in the archive because the archive just collects more and more. You just I guess a building could be an archive. And so my work is very process driven, whether it be working with sound, wind, silk that moves. So I'm printing onto silk rather than printing onto archival paper.
Yeah,
the silk was made by a silkworm. It's alive. And then when it's activated by wind, it moves like plasma. So yeah,
That's
those are
one
the
of the
sorts of
things, like
things.
I watched two performances of yours. One was one in Minnesota, I think, from memory.
Oh yes, that
Yeah,
was for the Prince in
yeah, that
Minneapolis.
was,
Yeah.
and then I also watched I watched the end as well, to the speech that you did at the end, which was really nice. And then I also watched the one that you sent through the gallery, which was, I watched two. So I've actually, no, to be honest with you, I watched three. So, but one wasn't so much a performance, I don't think, but more so a collection of images. Is that right?
So I also directed you to the Grey Gardens Gallery
Yeah, that's
website,
the one
which
that I
is
went to. Yeah.
someone Sean Miles curated that, and Sean is a Maori artist, and we collaborate a lot.
Yeah.
And it was at the Slab Lab.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. So that was filmed on my dining room table. I mean, obviously in isolation we have to you know work out new ways of working. But my dining room has become a lab, and so and part of starting this process, Sean gave me, as the curator, Sean gave me some guidelines, and one of the guidelines was, queer, how you identify as queer, and how your work is activist.
Sure.
And my sister died of a heart attack very young,
Oh, I'm so
and
sorry.
it was definitely stress related.
Yeah.
And I found when I was lying on the slab, which is also a fun kind of reference to Rocky Horror Picture Show, come up to the lab and see what's on the slab. I was on the table, and I surrounded by all this, all of my artwork, these sort of, black, dark images that are activated by a black light. I found myself going into this sort of heavy breathing. And while I was doing this heavy breathing, I was hitting my back against the glass table. And while I was doing that, an image came to my mind of my sister having a heart attack when unfortunately she didn't get to hospital where she was able to get her heart started in that way. But I was sort of visualizing, being on a slab and really gasping for my last breaths, much like a fish would out of water, because AC/DC also means for in Indonesia, in some Indonesian transgender cultures, it means being able to be gender fluid. And there's another name for it, which is amphibie, which is relating to the amphibian, meaning sea. You can go sea and land. And I think being on that slab, being on that table, was sort of, I was really present to so many things. I was present to, a fish, or just not being able to breathe, really trying to take these gasps.
Yeah, sure.
And how an amphibian, learned how to breathe through, in sea and on land. And so, yeah, I mean, we've only got a certain amount of time, but that's where the water element comes in on my work. So I do a lot of work in the ocean and in the water. And by the way, I believe Bon Scott's ghost lives in the water in the Indian Ocean in Fremantle. So a lot of my work relates to coming out of the water. And, just really acknowledging that, however many millions, 500 million years ago, I think even longer, that amphibians, started walking out of the water, and then where we are now. and it's only taken us 2,000 years to really destroy things.
So let's focus on that. So on that slab curation, sorry, the slab gallery stuff that you did. So just for context for people, if they want to watch it, I'll if it's okay with you, Bon, I'll put the link so there's further reading for people to do in the description so they can go and check out the performances. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, well, I just need to say that I didn't curate that.
No.
That was a show that I was invited to, and it was curated by a Maori artist, and there are Indigenous artists in the show. So it's really important that we'd love people to see that, because it's all about being queer and being an activist artist, and we all responded by film in isolation to Sean's curatorial premise.
So let's talk about the performance that you did for that gallery, the invitation that you had. So if people want to pause now, go back, watch it, and then they'll have context. But I'm just going to push on. So what was the process that you went through in terms of like when you were asked to do this performance and you were given the guidelines that you for your show to be within? What was the process?
Mm-hmm.
What were your first sort of, this is what I want to achieve, and this is the goals and the message that I want to send, and this is how I'm going to do it? What was your process there?
Oh, thanks for asking. It's such a great question. So, I mean, obviously, I had to have many conversations with Sean, mm-hmm. and I actually, put a few ideas out there, and then actually something I've been doing more in lockdown than I've done in a long time. I really did start with drawing in my art practice, but lately I've been doing a lot of drawing. But regardless, whenever I do a performance, I always draw it. So I draw the choreography of the performance. And for that reason, I also research a lot of other performance artists that draw their choreography. So originally, I was going to be, walking from my courtyard while dripping this glow-in-the-dark makeup onto the floor. And so I drew all the different parts, kind of like you would what do you call it? Not a mood board, what they use for film.
Storyboard.
Storyboard, yeah.
Yeah,
so I would draw it like a performance, and I'd also make the different storyboards.
Sure.
And then I start to think, well, what technology have I got, available? What obviously I can't bring in a film crew in isolation. So I've got an iPad. I'm living with my partner, who's an astronomer, and also he loves film and photography. Yeah. And I did more drawings, and I knew I wanted to involve the luminescent paint, and I knew I wanted to involve the black lights. And so really it started with, and then I also with all of this sort of complex science, I make artwork describing the scientific processes, and I lay all those collaged pieces of drawings and photographs and artworks that I've made on the slab. I lay them all on the glass table, and then there was a large mirror in the room, which I also made as a sculpture. That was part of the Negretto work, which is based around alchemy. Yeah. And then I just started doing the performance, and I did it in one take. I don't really believe in rehearsing. for performances. So I did it in one take, and when Dwayne showed me the footage, I realized instantly that it needed to be reversed.
Because I remember like listening to it, I was like, oh, that's a cool effect you've done with your sound. I was like, and you'd even sort of like, oh, you've married it up to the visual really well. I was like, oh, but you literally just reversed the entire clip. Is that right?
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So, starting, I ended up under the table, and I mean, there's so many fun ways of describing the table, but there's also a lot of terrifying things
for sure
about the table. Some people are terrified to sit down with their family at the table. It just brings up so much anxiety. Some people it's a great way of communicating. For me, it was definitely a laboratory. I felt like a specimen that was gasping for my last breaths.
Well, that's exactly what it looked like, to be honest. Yeah, I mean, it was the sound was amazing too. I was pretty impressed with that, and the silks as well, with the colours you had. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
So actually, when we get out of lockdown, I'll have to have you for dinner in my dining room.
Please, at the lab.
So I actually just received a grant to work in my dining room and produce, as an R&D project.
Sure.
And, I'm working on, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm working on, serviettes and ways of, lighting. And I'd really like to be able to access more people with my artwork than being in a gallery. So if I can,
cross mediums.
If I could, I'm not saying I want to turn my artwork into pieces of design that are mass manufactured, but I would like to be able to have that sort of intimacy with an artwork, like, that has got a quote on it that's quite confronting, and then you wipe your mouth on this serviette. It's quite an intimate process.
So what's for you? What's the just digressing a tiny bit here? What's the push against the commercialism, or do you feel like there's a sellout aspect of saying someone took one of your prints and were like, oh, we would love to use our prints in cooperation with this product, or because we believe in your message, can we buy that, or can we work with you on this? Do you have a resistance towards that, or
No, I'd love to sell my work. I'd love to be able to earn a living, and a very good living from my work, and I'd like to be able to pay other artists I collaborate with, and that's what I'm really aiming to do. I guess I've listened to some of your podcasts, and I know that you like evidence-based research, and the evidence is that 85% of the artists that sell their work are white and male. So it doesn't really, what is that other 15%? And in France it's even smaller. In some parts of the world, I mean, in Australia and the US, 15% is quite a large percentage of anyone that's not white and male and selling their work. So I guess when you start looking at that, you start looking at, well, do I really want to just make work that is accessible to collectors, like a painting that is, a really great color palette, or do I want to make an artwork that could potentially inspire someone to learn about a new way of thinking and that creates social change? And I believe that artists, particularly in times where people are very distrusting of politics and other, forms of authority, or maybe they're even questioning their education, I believe it is the role of artists to discuss different modes of living that are more sustainable, and questioning dualisms, questioning everything. And part of that is new processes of making art. So I guess it's a type of innovation.
Sure.
Which some galleries have said to me, I'd love to show your work, but I wouldn't know where to start. You only do performance. And I'm like, well, I'm printing onto silk, I'm building installations, I'm making sculptures, I'm drawing, all of those. If they really wanted to be able to package it to an art collector, it's all possible. It's just that I'm approaching it in a different kind of a way.
Yeah, this sounds like a lazy response that people, or a lazy statement that people make when they say, I love what you do, I would love to, exhibit it or, display it or buy it, but I just don't know really where to start. It just feels like a cop-out statement, a lazy statement, and because they just don't want to go any further with it. Personally, I just think my community that makes similar types of, has similar types of processes. You can be very, very discouraging, to be working for so long and watch other people that have just come out of uni that are already having their art collected. I mean, some of it has to do with who your family are and, your connections and so forth. But I think really when you're wanting to make artwork that has got a really strong philosophical activist sort of message to it, it takes time. And I guess I have faith that eventually it's going to happen, because I think eventually collectors are going to say, I actually want to buy art that makes me think about how society needs to change, rather than buying something that looks great in my lounge room. I think just on that topic, like one of the great artists this is just totally just one of my opinions, that in terms of societal change, this artist tends to look at a societal change at an individual, so that she tries to evoke societal change through an individual. So by evoking something in an individual and then evoking lots of individuals through that, making societal change. And the artist is Yoko Ono, and she does a like. Do you know the story of Yoko Ono and John Lennon, how they met?
I mean, I've researched Yoko Ono when she first moved to New York, before she met John Lennon. And, she was from a very wealthy family, and her parents bought her a warehouse, and she facilitated so much performance art in that apartment. Yeah. And there was so much important performance art going on that she supported. But one of my favorite performances is her work cut piece.
I love that. Yeah,
where she gets the audience to cut off her clothes. It's such a powerful performance.
Yeah. So what she does, just in case there's people out there, that she recently invited Lady Gaga to do the same performance. The last few years, fact check me on it. Hit me. Do it. But so what she does is she sits on a stage wearing just regular clothes, or just a sack, or just
it's a pretty prim and proper outfit. Like she's wearing a really nice shirt, and she's very elegant. Her hair is nicely tied back. She looks very, very elegant.
Yeah.
And refined. She looks very refined. So, getting these pieces cut out, it looks quite violent.
And then, but there's no, just to keep going on the context, so that the people that come into the auditorium or the warehouse or where the performance is taking place, they sit down, and it's just Yoko or the performer on the stage on a chair or standing, with a table in front with a sign and a pair of scissors in front of it, and the sign will say "cut me," or "take a piece," or "cut a piece off." And then it's pretty much just audience-based performance participation, because she doesn't speak, does she?
No, and she doesn't change her expression. I mean, there is one moment that someone, I mean, everyone's being quite respectful. You know, they'll take like one little chunk out of, you know, one part of her sleeve, or, you know, and then someone eventually, you know, chops where you can see more of her breast. But there was one person that was a little bit more aggressive, and you could see her face, you know, she really tried to keep her facial expression neutral. It's an incredible performance. So it's a durational performance.
What do you think that says for you in terms of like someone that's cutting off that, you know, aggressively wanting to take off more and aggressively do it, and then also the ability to, you know, the patience and the ability to self-reliance or self-resilience, maybe even to sit there and accept that that person wants to take more and be more aggressive with they cut. What is that saying to you?
Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons why I choose to do many of my performances naked.
Yeah.
Because I am very vulnerable. And I find, you know, once you start putting clothes on, well, what do you put on? You know, do you put a pair of underwear on?
Yeah, I have this conversation with myself every day.
Well, I mean, if you have an audience, the underwear, I feel, you know, it starts telling a story, or, you know, depending on the sorts of underwear you put on, it could be sexualizing the body more. So I guess I just want to be seen as energy rather than a body. And how I see Yoko, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that piece is extremely famous, and it's a profound feminist work, and I can't believe you've asked me to discuss such an important work off the cuff. But so I mean, really it's about objectification. That, you know, she's an so for some people may not know about the subject and the object and feminism and how, you know, the male gaze. But what I believe, you know, according to what was going on in feminism at that time, it was talking about the male gaze, and each part of that fabric being cut, the eye would, you know, the gaze would be towards the missing part because it was flesh. But and, you know, then you have you know, so, you know, it's a gender and race piece, but it's also well, very much an activist piece, and showing that. It actually reminds me a lot of Helen of Troy. I read somewhere where, you know, Helen was being suited off to her, you know, her father was trying to suit her to a husband, and so he brought her out naked, so that, you know, the men could decide whether she'd be, you know, she was suitable, the right wife. And Helen's sister said, how can you possibly have such a dignified look on your face and such a strong look when you're naked? And she said, they might be able to see me, but they can't see me. They can't see the real Helen. They can't really see me.
I like that.
So I think that's what Yoko was saying, that you can do what you want to a woman, but we are extremely, you know, we will keep fighting. And standing strong.
That's good. Like, so, I mean, I guess I wanted to just briefly touch upon it because it's a really important piece. But I think the most important thing for me personally that I think art is supposed to do is generate conversation and generate change in people and encourage that. And if we have, you can totally disagree with me if you wish as well, but if we go forward in life and we don't have the bravery to talk about things, and discuss things. What's the point in the art? If we're all just keeping it in our heads, in our hearts, and we're not talking about these things that are important to us, then the job of the artist is left on the wayside, or left on the stage, or the canvas, and it's not echoing among the people that are viewing it, and people that are that it's speaking to, and then also the people that it's not speaking to, but indirectly sort of affecting and talking about, and all these things are really important. And so that's, I mean, I was definitely not trying to corner you or cross you or anything.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it was actually quite exciting to be able to talk about such important artwork. I'm glad that I, have done quite a bit of research into it. I think the other thing that, a very positive part to come out of the artwork, and a way of connecting to where we are today, because we are in isolation, and, many people have got all sorts of mental health things to consider. And YouTube is just so brilliant for that. And I've been researching the work of Mott, who works with trauma, and being able to transcend a traumatic childhood, whether you were neglected or whatever the case may be. And really that, it seems that the key is to be present in the present moment, and during this pandemic, people are either fighting the present moment, and they don't want to know about it, and they're getting drunk or whatever, or they're doing deep work, whether they're making artwork or whether they're learning to meditate. And I think that's the other thing that comes out of Yoko's work, is just being present to what was going on every moment. I think, that's something we can all learn from also.
Yeah, I agree. And that's definitely, that's one thing I hope that this pandemic is allowing people to do, is just learn and be current in the present, or be present in the present moment. And because, as we were saying at the beginning of the conversation, we literally are just taking this a day at a time, and people are trying to do the best they can. I think generally speaking, people are trying to do their best, and some things just made a little bit more difficult. That's it.
And also, learning about something like lightning, it's just so exciting to learn, about the quantum world. And so, even just teaching ourselves things that we don't know about nature, is just so exciting. So, we can, I think, I think that artists have a role to inspire people to learn about the world and themselves and their relationships. And yeah, that's why I make work.
Well, actually, on that, so how do you feel like your message is translated for other people, and how do you think people view and see your work, both directly, like how do you think that people are viewing your work, and how is it being not just accepted but just translated? Is your meaning or your messages?
Yeah, I know that. I mean, as I'm just going to try and go by evidence rather than my own opinions or paranoias or. I know that my work is very well received in Europe. Yeah. I know that when I've done a lot of work in Serbia, Italy, France. I'm just trying to think. Those are the main places I'm thinking about. My work's just really, people just really want to know more about it, and they really want to meet me and talk about my work. And also in the US and Canada, you know, I'm not a young artist. And, you know, often when I go into galleries, well, you know, Australia, you know, and many galleries or many people in the art world focus around youth, and, you know, and that has to do with collectability, you know, you know, they start collecting their work when they're 25, and what will their be worth when they're 40? When I was in the galleries in LA, I just found, you know, the modern art galleries, I just found like the curators, the directors, they just would make a beeline to me and just want to talk to me about my practice. So I do find the Australian market quite difficult to tap into. However, I've got to say that within my community, which is, you know, gender diverse, from my research overseas, the artwork that my community are producing is in Melbourne is absolutely, you know, of really high international standard, and therefore I'm really proud to be amongst that community.
Oh, that's really cool.
So I know that I'm well received within in those communities, but I guess the more normative communities just think I've probably lost my mind.
I think a lot of them think, I know a lot of friends of mine think that my mind is fairly lost, but
yeah,
I think it's just like, I can't help the way I'm wired, dude. It's just how I am, you know. Like, I don't know, what is a box if there's a sphere?
I mean, I apply for so many grants, and I always get the panel always says the work did not look achievable. You know, it was not. I just over and over and over again, the project did not look achievable. I'm like, but have you seen what I've been making? You know, my project's been so ambitious, and I've made them, I've done them. So I think, yeah, a lot of people struggle with the complexity of the work.
Sure.
You know, it can't be sort of, Western education, you know, is very separated into fields of, you know, whether it's science, chemistry, or, you know, astrophysics, you know, art, English literature, you know, and when you start to be interdisciplinary, or transdisciplinary actually is my real interest. You know, people start thinking, well, it's a weak argument because it's crossing too many areas. And this is why I'm so interested in Indigenous philosophies, because Indigenous philosophies are transdisciplinary. You know, you can't have one without the other. You know, everything's interconnected. And so, you know, like learning about lightning, it's, you know, many people know that it happens in storm clouds, but without lightning, we wouldn't have nitrates. Well, that's, you know, and that's, you know, we need protein to live. And, you know, it's complex. And some people get a bit scared off by those complexities.
Yeah. Do you think as well that also a lot of people get scared off because they're trying to make sense of something when sometimes some things don't need sense to be made of? Because I think
it's more people like, I guess people with a commercial, you know, traditional commercial mind want to know how things can be packaged.
Sure.
And, you know, they want a tidy package, you know, and a painting is perfect for that. You know, it's a square or a rectangle. And I mean, there are paintings that come out of the square. I'm not saying that I don't think painting is valid. Of course it is. It's just a lot more, you know,
more packageable.
You know, there's a tradition that's been going on for so long with painting, and you can put it on your wall, and it's got, you know, you can measure it with a right angle, you know, the canvas, and the medium is, it's not hard to figure out what the ingredients of the medium are. I mean, that's a generalization. A lot of artists work with all kinds of mediums.
Yeah, for sure.
But, people like a simple, and that goes back to why I identify as non-binary. I don't want to be packaged as one thing. I don't want to be packaged as cis female, I don't want to, I just refuse to be categorized like that. And so a lot of it is actually educating art collectors.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big process. And I'm quite excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, even with artworks, I mean, a lot of the time someone says, "Oh, this is a nice painting," or thing with print on it, and sometimes you're just like, I don't really see the appeal to that one, and then but that's just, everyone's got their taste, everyone's got their flavor, don't they? And some people like things more than other things, and sometimes things, like I remember going to see the Mona Lisa, and for me the Mona Lisa wasn't the most amazing thing in the Louvre, and even the whole thing, the Mona Lisa painting wasn't even the most amazing thing about the Mona Lisa. I thought the most amazing thing about Mona Lisa, the painting, was the crowds that it drew, and why. Just the fact that people were more interested in taking a selfie next to the painting rather than just being present with the painting, which, again, I didn't think all that much of. I appreciate and respect the history of it, but for me, I was like, meh, it's cool, it's all right. It's not, it's not like an incredible sculpture or, some of Van Gogh's works, more, incredible. It wasn't, for me, it just didn't really grab me. But the crowds that it drew and just the hysteria that it created, I found fascinating. And who knows, it might not even be in the real one.
It's an interest. For me, it's that it is an interesting work where, the female is looking directly to the viewer, but you don't really know if she's female either. I kind of like that about the work. There's not a lot of indicators she doesn't actually look male or female, and just the little smirk. Well, even though I'm saying, I think a lot of people like the thought that she's got a little trick up her sleeve,
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to it.
There's some people, some people might be attracted to that, but we've been educated about Western art through our secondary education and primary education and our parents. But if we were educated about the importance of other artworks, installation art, for example, or even if we were told the statistics of how many women were artists back then, in the Renaissance, for people to start questioning, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah, I do have hope for the future. That I totally agree with you that there's in the past and even quite presently, there's the diversity is definitely not there, or the equality is definitely not there in a lot of workforces and a lot of fields of work, and right even into the arts, which is, I think it's a crying shame. But I do have hope that things are definitely changing. People are a lot more aware of it. I know that there's lots of, within fields of my life, like from the art world to film and TV to even surfing, I'm seeing a lot more inclusion and diversity. Like, even looking at surfing, for example, like the World Surf Tour was the first international sport to have equal pay. And in the water, you see a lot more women than you saw, 5-10 years ago, and it just creates a much better environment for one, but it's just, I don't know, I think the world is for everyone to enjoy and everyone to explore, and I just think that the old way, or the old gender discrimination and even race discrimination, I think it's being superseded, and it's just, it's unfortunately it's not overnight, but I definitely have hope for the future that tomorrow is definitely getting, like, every day it's getting a little bit better, and I love that. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It is difficult though to change the system if everyone's still identifying the same, and that's one of the other reasons why I identify as lightning, to step outside of our previous my previous knowledge of how to identify, and it's a way of looking at the world differently. And I think when people I don't know if you know Genesis Peerage. No, they just passed away early this year. They started off as a man. They invented industrial music, moved to New York, and started identifying as androgynous. And Genesis gives me a lot of lessons. They're saying really what we need to do to change society is do it in small groups, and you need to really, really trust who you're hanging out with, and you need to have total conviction, and so you need to have a huge amount of courage. We just don't have time not to have courage right now. Genesis Peerage. That's a really, if you're wanting to learn a little bit more about gender diversity, that's a good place. And their work is a lot of fun. They do a lot of great talks, at all the major art museums around the world.
Was it Genesis Peerage?
Genesis Peerage. So Genesis as in
Genesis.
Yeah. And then P apostrophe ORRITE.
I see. Singer. Oh, right. I'll put a link to some Wikipedia stuff in the description. And
yeah, they wrote a book called The Psychic Bible, and it's spelled psychic is spelled
chick is in
chick.
Yeah, chick. Yeah, and the chick at the end, CHICK. Yeah. Released in 2010.
Yeah. And then what I would be great if you want to provide the link for Amaru. I can provide some links, because there's also feminist philosophers who talk about like Rosi Braidotti talks about human rights and who has them, and Karen Brad is a quantum physicist and a gender theorist.
For sure.
Myra Hurt is a biologist and writes books about queering the non-human. She wrote about all the different animals in the world that are non-binary, or they're not, they definitely can't be categorized as male or female. So I can send you some links, and then there's also Dark Emu would be a really good link.
Yeah, for sure. I'm totally up for educating people and totally up for being part of the discussion. And my platform's not about judgment, and it's not about debating with people, although I do like to debate if sometimes it's important. But feel free, please send through any links, and I will definitely happily put those links in descriptions where people can curiosity gets the better of them and they want to find out some more and learn more about the world that they live in. Then absolutely, pretty please. Yeah, I would love that.
Oh, well, it's been so great to chat with you on such a quick turnaround. Just getting your email the other day, and I just thought, I'm ready to do this.
I've actually had your email for quite a while. I found you, I think, right at the start of the year, towards the start of the year, and then obviously the pandemic picked in, and I totally forget how I came across. Might have been your website, or came across something.
There was an
article
and written in the Age on my show.
No, it wasn't. It was very accidental. Like most of the stuff in my life is very accidental, and it was pretty accidental. I was like, "Who is this?" And I was like, and then I went to your bio and was like, "Identifies as lightning." I'm like, "Okay, I really need to learn more about you." Like, I have to talk to this. I have to talk to this person and find out, one, is this person real, or is it like it's legit? Like, and I just really had to. I was just way too curious just to let it pass, and then I just got busy, and then the world sort of disappeared from under our feet, and then it just took.
Well, I really like. I think what you're saying there is also really important, because I think the other really important thing that we need to do when we're in this sort of pandemic is to remain curious.
It's so important. Yeah.
If we can be curious about everything, then that means we've got an open mind, and it also means that we can start seeing what's really going on, in our own lives and others. And I think so. I'm commending your curiosity.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely the curiosity's got me in a lot of trouble in the past when people misreading it. But I totally own my mistakes, and I know I try to listen, and I try to be patient and non-judgmental for whatever it is that people have in life that they want to bring. I just think the world is too small and too short-lived for people to hide in fear and not explore the caves in life that challenge them.
Well, I mean, really, all you need to do is really know that you can, if you are curious, you might be able to find the cracks in the cave and find some light,
Well, even better, right?
Yeah.
Well, I genuinely appreciate you taking the time today to jump online with me and have this chat. It's been absolutely eye-opening and wonderful, and I'm very appreciative of you taking your time.
Oh, pleasure.
Is there anything else that you want to add or let people know, or is this any sort of closing comments that you want to make?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess I didn't really start with any kind of acknowledgement, and I probably should end with that.
Sure.
I acknowledge that, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the ancient land that we now call Australia. And the people of the Kulin Nation. I acknowledge that the land, sea, and sky were never ceded, and I pay my deepest respect for First Nation people's past, present, and future. So I think that's a good place to finish.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Bon. Please enjoy your day, and I look forward to your email.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, cool. Thank you so much, Bon, for jumping on the podcast with me and taking the time out of your day to sit down and chat and just open up, be vulnerable, be brave, and just have an open discussion with me. Really deeply appreciate it. Also, thank you to everyone outside, or inside, or in your car, or wherever the hell you are, space, I don't know, that takes the time out of their lives to sit down and have a listen to the podcast. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you listening. And please, as always, if you feel like you need to make comments or you want to get in touch, or for whatever reasons, just flick us an email, leave a remark or a comment or a review somewhere. Just hit us up. Please don't be afraid to get in contact and say, hey, hola. Anyway, moving on. Thank you so much again. Once again, peace, be cool, be kind to each other, and just stay warm and stay cool, and whatever the hell that means. Anyway, cool. Catch you later.